If somebody needs a translation from Ukrainian to English, you can have it.
It's September 21, Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum starts its operation, and my name is Svetlana Cheparenko. Let's start our day with a conversation about interconfessional cooperation between the religious communities of the United States and Ukraine for the sake of the peace of Ukraine. Let me introduce our guest. Today is Dr. Mohammed Zaher Sahloul, MedGlobal President, Professor at the University of Illinois in Chicago, Kareem M. Irfan, Vice President of the Islamic Society of North America, Professor Leonard Rubinstein, Director of the Program on Human Rights, Health, and Conflict at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, Reverend Gregory C. Livingston, pastor, preacher, civil rights and community leader in New York, Sheikh Rustam Ghafouri, Deputy Mufti of Ukraine of the Religious Administration of Muslims of Ukraine, representative of the Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations, and Evelina Kurilets, Director at Razum for Ukraine Charitable Foundation. Ms. Evelina, let's start with you. Can you please tell us about this area of activity of your charitable foundation? Why do you think that it's important now to set up the interconfessional dialogue? For the time being, our foundation works on 5 programs. One of them is the advocacy work area. We understand that advocacy is one of the tools that can, first of all, bring a victory closer, and second, help us achieve the justice in the legal field in the way that we see it, and third, to get help for Ukraine in the way that it's necessary. We understand that this war is not only the war of Ukraine. It's many countries and many people, they have the same enemy in common with us. It's not about confession or nationality, and we have to get united with those with whom we have the same vision, the same perception of the vision of victory, the same vision of what justice is and what is the vision of punishment for the perpetrators. We had 2 Ukraine fashion summits. The last one was taking place in spring this year, in the end of October this year. We will have another Ukraine Action Summit in Washington that will unite an immense number of organizations, both Ukrainian and Georgian, Syrian, organizations from all over the world that got united to counter the enemy. And they are usually the people who, the people who visit this Ukrainian Action Summit are usually the citizens of the United States, and it's valuable for us that it's an example of American democracy when every voter can come to their congressman and say, I want this, I want us to support this. I was visiting Washington in the spring last year, and I was impressed by the way this system works. Talking about the interconfession dialogue, during our last visit, the last visit of our advocacy team to Ukraine, we were happy to meet the Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations, and we realized that it's a very valuable cooperation, very valuable experience, and it can be of benefit to Ukraine. This is why we were invited to the visit to the United States. We will be visiting Florida, Miami, senators in Washington, D.C., and we have high expectations from that meeting. I don't want to take a lot of time. I'm sure that every guest has something to say on behalf of themselves and on behalf of the communities that they represent here in Ukraine. And Razum Charitable Foundation will do everything they can to make this visit happen and to support the further projects of our cooperation. Mr. Mohammed.
Tell us please more about this mission and your goal here in Ukraine, and what are you doing to advocacy among religious communities in the United States about this war in Ukraine?
Good morning. This is my fourth visit to Ukraine and the second visit to Kiev since the full-scale invasion happened. This is a new mission to us in MedGlobal, because we are inviting also faith leaders and civic leaders, academics and human rights defenders from the United States to witness what's happening and to see the impact of the war on the different sectors of the Ukrainian society. What you hear in the news is only bits and pieces in the United States. It does not reflect the impact of the war on people. It focuses on geopolitics, it focuses on Russia, it focuses on the front line and advances and the counteroffensive, but it does not give you idea as a citizen in the United States about how people are affected. A couple of days ago we had a meeting in one of the universities, in the Kevchenko National University, and one of the medical students said, and I told her that we see the resiliency of the Ukrainian people and how things are normal despite of the war. Yesterday we had 2 alarms. They were bombing in the middle of the night. Some of us were not able to go back to sleep. You know, this is not normal to us. But we see how things are normal in the streets, how people are acting as normal, and life continues because people want to live in Ukraine. The medical student, Anna, told us that we looked like normal from the outside, but we're not normal in the inside. Everyone that we met with them spoke about the impact of the war on their mental health of the children, of the women, of the elderly, of the people who are fighting. Yesterday we visited a rehabilitation center for the soldiers who have PTSD and traumatic brain injury. So we wanted to convey this full picture of the impact of the war on citizens. On faith communities, because the Christians and the Jews and the Muslims of Ukraine are also suffering and they are part of the society. This diversity of the Ukrainian people is not there in the media in the United States. So that's why we had Christians, we had Muslim, and we had Jewish leaders within this delegation to connect to the faith communities and to bring the full picture, not only to policymakers, so hopefully it will affect their policy toward Ukraine and continue the support that we have to Ukraine and increase the support, because that's what everyone said, that Kiev is safe because of the support of the United States, because we have the Patriarch system, but we need more. And that's the reason that we have this delegation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kareem, the next question for you. In your opinion, why is the Ukrainian experience in this war is important for the whole world, and how does communication between Islamic communities work?
Good morning. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
As I was walking into this building, there was a poster that I came across, recruiting for the army. And I asked my dear friends to translate that for me. And it said, join our team. If there is a condensed answer that I can give you, it is to carry that message of join our team around the world. The rest of the world has to be aboard on this. Yesterday, as we were speaking to the Honorable Deputy Foreign Minister, Amina Taparova, the point that I brought out was Ukraine is defending its freedom and its country, but it's doing so on behalf of the entire world. It is fighting evil, and it is standing as a bulwark or a dam against a global attack on civilization and all notions of freedom and independence to be replaced by dictatorship, authoritarianism, racism. So now let me come to the point of what you have answered. We want to recruit the entire world as a team, but we want to start with the country that we come from. We want to be able to come here, feel the pain that you all do. One of the most embarrassing aspects of our trip for us, for me, has been when caring people like you tell us you are courageous for coming here. I'm ashamed when I hear that. Because bravery, courage, is manifest by you. You people who have given up your lives, you're staying away from your families, you've lost your families, your loved ones, and you have chosen to be here fighting with your blood and your life for the honor of your country and for the stability of the entire world. So as we gather here as Muslims and Christians and Jews and people of other faiths and possibly people who may not have full faith, what we do share in common is truth, justice. We know that this is a war of good against evil. We know that justice will only come by taking all the actions that were undertaken as part of the war and undoing them. So it'll be Ukraine, Crimea, all of that. And we want to take this message back as the word of God that we all have been commissioned to live on this earth. We want the people of America to understand and feel the pain. And I'll end with this. We were leaving the hotel, there was this young lady who was setting up the table at the restaurant next door, and she looked calm, and I wanted to take a photo to say, people are maintaining calm. I went up to her, and I just started saying, Slava Ukraini. She broke down in tears. So it was the facade you're talking about. You are putting up your courage, but internally you're shaken and pained, and you're crying. We want to take that message back to America and saying, feel this pain, feel the tears, and then the least we can do is support you with all your military needs, but we need to be doing more so that we can stand in solidarity. That is what this mission of togetherness of people of different faith for truth and justice and prevailing of evil. Slava Ukraini, once again.
Heroям слава. Thank you very much. Professor Len, please tell us about the communication and cooperation between the scientific communities of USA and Ukraine.
Thank you. Starting with MedGlobal, one of the purposes of our visit was to speak to people in the health system and learn more about medical needs so that we as an NGO and other NGOs, and as importantly, international donors, can help support the health system and health care in Ukraine now and in the future after the war. Of course, the first job is to support, to gain American and other support for winning the war, in however that can happen. But it's also to make sure that Ukraine can recover. And I want to first make a comment that it is truly extraordinary how in this devastating and brutal war, the health system is functioning and functioning very well in most of the country. That there are services, there's primary care, there's specialized care, there's medical education, and yet below the surface there are a lot of challenges. There's been a lot of attrition among health workers who've left Ukraine. We met with the director of the Kyiv Health Department, and she told us that she only has 40% of the staff in public health for Kyiv that she has, or 60%. She's lost 40% that she had before the war. And beyond that, of course, is the incredible violence inflicted on healthcare. Hundreds of hospitals, hundreds of pharmacies, ambulance, arrest and detention and torture of doctors in occupied territories, forcing Russian nationality on doctors in occupied territories. These are terrible crimes, and in fact, these crimes are more extensive than in any war I've ever looked at, and I've been doing this for 25 years. More than 1,000 attacks on healthcare in a war that's lasted less than 2 years to date. It's never been this systematic, never this extensive, and yet the system is functioning. But there has been a cost, and the cost, of course, is greatest in the areas under occupation, where we don't even know the extent of what's happened. So there is a lot of work that's going to need to be done. And that includes justice. It's not simply repair and recovery, it's justice. I said this is the greatest level of attacks on healthcare I've ever seen, but it's also true that there has never been accountability for these attacks. There's been complete impunity. We're increasing documentation and reporting in Syria, in Afghanistan, in African conflicts, but there's never been prosecutions. And it's very encouraging to learn that the Prosecutor General, as well as the International Criminal Court, is pursuing investigations. And we need to encourage and support those efforts, and we will try to do that.
Thank you very much. Reverend Gregory, you're building a communication between Christian communities of USA and Ukraine. In your opinion, why is it important now during this war?
Thank you. And I want to say grand risings to my Ukrainian brothers and sisters. It is important. Well, let me approach it this way. I'm a churchman, I'm a minister, I'm a pastor, and I am a product of the historical black church in America from the South and on up. And interfaith was expressed in such eloquence 60 years ago in Washington, D.C., in front of Congress, the White House, and everywhere else, where Martin Luther King Jr. said, we need to come together, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, and if I can add, Muslims and Orthodox. And then he didn't miss any category of citizen. He said, little black boys and little white girls, little white boys and little black girls. And I add, little Ukrainian boys and little Ukrainian girls, and little American boys and little American girls, and just the world over, we come together. And Martin put that forth, not just inside the four walls of his Ebenezer Baptist Church, but he did it all over the country and around the world. He met with Buddhists, he met with Sikhs, he met with Muslims, he even met with white racists. You see, that's how powerful faith is, because Ukraine, I love Ukraine. It's awesome, you know. And you all are some beautiful people, too. I really mean that. Wow, you know. But here's the thing. This genetic nation, as it were, this genetic nationalism, as it were, right? There's a homogeneity, a homogeneousness about Ukraine. And what we have to understand about faith is that faith is not limited by your skin color, your hair texture, or your blood type. You see, and family has all those things in common. And we say in America that blood is thicker than water. But Interfaith says blood may be thicker than water, but we understand that spirit is thicker than blood. And King said that all God's children, and we're saying that that spirit binds us all together. So we have all these various disciplines, but what you need, you can have a stove, pots and pans, ingredients and flour and eggs, but you need fire to bring all that together where everyone can share it. And so the interfaith community brings the fire of God, that's the vertical, and of our humanity together. And we have to walk in that. And here's the key. Even though you may not see it yet, my Ukrainian brothers and sisters, I'm here to declare to you from my own history that you may not see it, but we've learned and we share with you, we have to walk by faith and not by sight. Thank you.
Thank you. Шейх Рустам, питання до вас.
Thank you, Sheikh Rustam. Why, in your opinion, such visits of setting up interconfessional dialogue are important for Ukraine and for the Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations? Well, first of all, the Ukrainian Council of Churches is an interesting organization where we already have interconfessional dialogue going on for a number of years. And thus we understand that we provide opportunity for support to everybody in Ukraine, so that this support comes to Ukraine. And recently there was a meeting of the Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations, and we have a chairman who on behalf of everybody expressed the appreciation of the effort taken by MedGlobal on behalf of all the religious organizations of Ukraine for their support and their desire to stand by the side of Ukrainian people. And Ukrainian actors in all the religious organizations. They shared their experience of cooperation of religious organizations in performing humanitarian projects for the sake of overcoming Russian aggression. And I hope this support will be of more intense nature if there will be cooperation with MedGlobal. And what's important, as they mentioned, is to communicate the truthful, faithful information to the leaders of thoughts in the United States and in other countries whenever they go, to increase the support for Ukraine in countering Russian aggression aimed at civil population. Well, because, you know, the truth is not said very loudly. And such an opportunity to develop cooperation with foreign religious organizations so that we could stop the aggression against our country, it's very important, because the children, the women suffer. Well, everybody suffers, civilians, military, everybody is affected. So it's our joint goal to achieve the sustainable and just peace. And I know that the team of MedGlobal has already visited Bucha, Irfan, and other places where they could witness with their own eyes what the aggressor country has done to our people, to what was left from their homes. It's horror, and for us it's important to achieve not some short peace, but a just peace that would result in some guarantees of protection, so that the enemy never dares to attack us again. So our goal is the joint effort aimed at the good of the society, and we hope that every single individual, each of you, we may be the voice to communicate the faithful information about this bloody war where our civilians keep dying. And today's rocket attack is yet another proof of that terror. So it's important for us to stand together, to go together to the victory. And our organization, Religious Administration of Muslims of Ukraine, we work with other countries. We try, but unfortunately not everybody listens to us. And we know that the Muslims, the first greeting they have is Salam Alaikum, peace on you, peace on your home. So let there be peace in Ukraine, and let us achieve our goals within the shortest term possible. Thank you very much. I want to give the floor to our colleagues so they can ask questions. Good morning, Nadia Yurchenko, Ukrinform. I have a question to Ms. Korylets. You mentioned that there will be a visit of Ukrainian Council of Churches to the United States. No, that's going to be Ukrainian Action Summit, a third event of this type in Washington. It's aimed at gathering United States citizens who support America, who support the draft laws aimed at support of America. For example, like last year, Wagner Group was recognized as a terroristic organization, deportation of children as genocide, and many other legislative acts. So this is the work aimed at this goal. But the Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations will be represented in Washington, D.C. in October too, and they will have an opportunity to talk to senators and other political actors. I just wanted to find out what is the message they want to deliver to American community, American senators. And another question is to our American guests. The sociological surveys document the fall of the level of support of Ukraine by the American citizens. What is why does it happen so? And what could you say to these people to increase this support? Thank you very much. Well, let me answer the first question. There are some legislative acts or draft laws that are prepared in the United States, and the digital indicator of efficiency of Ukraine Actions Summit is that many congressmen became the co-sponsors of those draft laws. So we've felt the increase of the level of support after the Ukrainian Action Summit. They are the United States citizens. They may have different roots. They may originate from Georgia, from Ukraine, or elsewhere, but they have the right to vote. They can enter the office of their congressman and to express their views, their desires there, and to ask their congressman to support this or that draft law.
Is the main reason that we came here. As you know, the decision-making process in the United States is complicated. So you have the president, you have National Security Council, you have the State Department, you have the Congress, the Senates, and the representatives, and then you have the media, and you have civic society, you have faith groups, and each one of them interfere or affects the decision-making. In general, there is overwhelming support to the Ukrainian people in the United States, regardless of the differences. Of course, Russian propaganda is effective in certain groups in the United States, like in the world. We're seeing that President Zelensky's effort in the United Nations to meet with members of the Global South, because there is still hesitancy to support Ukraine in the Global South, Brazil and other countries. And the same thing in the United States. We have sectors of the communities, including extreme right and extreme left, and even faith groups who are not well supportive of the Ukrainian cause, because they don't know what's going on, and also because of the sometimes political differences, sometimes of the Russian propaganda. So when I meet with my Senator Dick Durbin, who's the second highest in the Democratic Party, he's very supportive. Senator Duckworth from Illinois, I'm from Illinois, from Chicago, is very supportive. My congressman is very supportive. But you have people in the Senate and the Congress that are on the edge because their constituency is not well supportive of the war. And when you have faith leaders and faith communities telling their senators and congressmen that I went to Ukraine and I witnessed the impact of this war on citizens and how Russia is actually bombing electricity and bombing Kiev, and how people are suffering, and how women are raped when we're occupied, and how yesterday we went to Bucha and Irfan, and we've seen the impact of the occupation. These things, these stories are very important to change the mindsets of people, including members of the Congress, including the media. I hope that each one of our delegation will write opinion editorial and articles in newspaper that will be read by thousands, if not others, millions of Americans who understand that this citizen who went to Ukraine understood the impact of the war. Sometimes the war presented in the media looks like very distant, but we want the reality bring the reality of the war in Ukraine to the American public, so that way we can influence policy and make sure that the support to Ukraine is sustained and also increased. So that way we will have an end to the war with the full liberation of the Ukrainian land, including Crimea, including things that maybe American people are not talking about. Yesterday we met with the Majlis of Crimea, and they said Crimea is part of the war. The war started with the invasion of Crimea, and it should end in Crimea. When we met with the faith leaders, with the all religious communities and the churches, with Mufti Ahmad and leaders of the churches and the synagogues, we had unified message. All of them are united behind the government here in supporting the war effort, and they are fighting for the full liberation of Ukraine. And we will transmit this picture to the Muslim and the Christian and the Jewish community in the United States. So hopefully we will have an end to the war with the full liberation of Ukraine, but we need to work for that. And that's why Razom and MedGlobal are part of a coalition called the American Coalition for Ukraine, where we have different communities, different ethnicities united behind Ukraine.
That's a very insightful and important question. So if I may add a different dimension to it, but built upon the same platform. And I go back to that poster that I saw, join our team. Who are we looking at as our team members is important. So yes, it is important that the President of the USA, the Senate, the Congress, the decision makers are on your side. And your president is a master communicator, and he's been doing a fantastic job, President Zelensky. Far be it from me to be offering any advice to such high heads of state. But what I would like to add is we cannot overlook the enormous power of public opinion and public support. And that is one of the key elements, as Dr. Zaher from MedGlobal, and I have to thank him for pulling this fantastic delegation together under your leadership. That is very important for us to go back and make sure that the messaging we have to do, but I'm saying as a friendly advice to those in positions of power here, and including the influence of the media here, do focus on that second segment. And for them, you cannot get into political nuances. You cannot get into tactical military decisions. What you have to get to them with is the heart of the problem, that this is a fight of good against evil. It's a stand on behalf of the civilization of this world. And you have to convey the humanitarian impact and what is going on. Yes, one of the biggest things that we will take back, of course, our duty is to come here, put a finger on the pulse of your suffering, have our hearts affected, shed a few tears, but then go back and get into action to promoting this message with our constituents. So you have faith leaders here. We are blessed that God has given us a pulpit. The pulpit is there to communicate a message of change. So we want to bring about that change. And what we have to be communicating, so there are two elements that I will say that I have come away with here. Of course, I've been moved by what has happened, but your resiliency is amazing. When this lady talks about how she had the opportunity of leaving in taking your young daughter away, but you decided in favor of the country. How many stories like that we have heard? And when we see, and this is one message I want to communicate to everybody in Ukraine, you do not have to be defensive in any way about the sense of normalcy. I've had people explain it to me, and what I'm telling them is that is part of your strength. What you're saying is that no matter how much you oppress us, no matter how much you massacre us, no matter how much you torture or rape us, we will continue living and we will continue fighting until we succeed. So that normalcy is your strength. And that is the passion that we need to understand and communicate back to the people and say, and I have changed. I can tell you, my wife and I were talking the day that we came. Yes, we knew that there would be missile alerts. But in the last 3 days, I tell you today, there were 2 of them. And I got up with a sense of your defiance. I got up and said, send 5 more attacks. Does not matter. We are going to be here. We'll continue with our meetings. We will hold hands and connect our hearts and souls with the fighting Ukrainian people, and we will overcome your evil with our power of good. That message has to be communicated, and God willing, then the truth will prevail. Justice will prevail, but we all have to get together as people in humanity.
Thank you. Does anybody want to add something?
Yes. Let me say this, is that in the work that I've done, I have found so many good people. But the problem has always been, there were many people that I have met, many groups, that wanted to do good, but didn't know how. That is always the problem. People want to do good, but they don't know how. And once we understand that the reason they're not doing it isn't always because they don't want to or that they're against it, but it is because they have not been trained or instructed or mentored on how you cross that hump. And in America, American politics, American government, for example, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, He was the great American president during World War II, which we were all a part of that are here. And A. Philip Randolph was a black civil rights leader during that time, incredibly effective. And so he had a conversation with Mr. Roosevelt about getting laws changed so that black people will be treated like American citizens. In other words, we cannot legislate morality, but we can moralize legislation. And so Mr. Roosevelt told Mr. Randolph, he says, I agree with everything you're saying, Mr. Randolph. He says, now you go out and make me do it. In other words, the President of the United States must have a mandate from the people in order to go forward. And so what we learned in the civil rights movement is that even before we had the right to vote, we fought for the right to vote. The Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, I can go down the line. The Fair Housing Act that happened after King was assassinated in 1968. But as my brothers and sisters have stated so eloquently, what happens with politicians is that they hear a narrative, they hear a story, and the narrative that is so powerful, and I believe Dr. Sahloul mentioned propaganda. There would be no propaganda if it wasn't effective, but it is. And so we also have to use propaganda. We don't have to lie, but it's more than just a counter narrative you must put forth. You see, when King said, look, black people want to be treated right, he didn't stop there. He said, I have a dream that all of us can benefit from an equal society. And so you have to have an overwhelming narrative. And one of the things that Dr. Sahloul, my brother Imam Ali, that we have talked about, what I would love to do, and people of my ilk, is to show many of our faith leaders that you may not be able to go into council chambers, you may not be able to do this and that, but as Imam Kareem here said, you have something even more powerful. You're speaking to the same group or a group of people consistently at least 52 times a year. 52 times a year, you are there in flesh and blood. You have the biology of your love. You have the biology of your intellect, that you are there with them. And when you are able to bring forth an overwhelming narrative, because our politicians are hearing the narrative of Russia. Our politicians and our people are hearing the narrative of Putin. See, the danger about demonizing Putin, about mythologizing Putin, makes him seem like he's not just like us, flesh and blood. But an overwhelming narrative knocks that out. Because it says, if you think he's bad, man, you ought to see Lynn Rubenstein. He's the baddest cat that ever walked the planet. And Rubenstein, I saw him dunk on Shaquille O'Neal. I saw him steal the ball from Michael Jordan. I saw him pick up Beyonce. Lynn Rubenstein is the man. Did you hear what I just did? You just got into it because I gave you a story. And our preachers, our imams, our priests, must understand to use these instruments and tools that God Almighty has given us. And then here's the biggest part. There's a great verse in the book of Hebrews that says the promises were given to the people, but they didn't work because they didn't mix them with faith. Look, a push-up will work for me just like a push-up will work for you, but you got to believe it does, then get down and do it.
Thank you.
Я тоді наостанок скажу.
We have just a couple of minutes to wrap up. What I want to add is that unpunished evil results in new crimes. Unpunished evil in Georgia emerged in Syria. Then the unpunished evil in Syria emerged here in Ukraine. And we're not only fighting against Russian Federation, who committed a lot of crimes in different countries with the representatives of different religions, but we're standing for a right to live. I stand for my right to raise my daughter, to give her the right to live in independent Ukraine, and this is what I stand for here. And I take pride in standing like this. I'm really fond of you. I want to thank you for standing by our side, for sharing our fight. And I hope that our victory will become a victory of other countries like Syria and other ones fighting the evil. A couple of words to add. Unfortunately, the crime is still continuing, and if we all together, you and us, if we can cheer up, so to say, our foreign friends, our foreign partners, to reduce that fatigue, it will result in sooner liberation of Crimea and Donbass and recovery of our Ukraine. We stand united against aggression. We stand united for justice and freedom for Ukraine, including Crimea and Donbass. Thank you very much. We want to thank all the panelists. Thank you for coming to Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum. We will continue our operation at 12 o'clock. As it was mentioned several times today, the enemy inflicted more strikes today on our civilians, on our peaceful cities. We will be talking to Yuri Ignat, the spokesperson of Air Force Command of Ukrainian Armed Forces. Stay tuned.